Acrisius, king of Argos, had a problem. The oracle at Delphi told him he'd be killed by his own grandson. He didn't have a grandson, but he had a daughter, Danae, and as long as Danae couldn't meet a man, he figured he was safe. So he locked her in a bronze tower, no windows, one door bolted, food passed through a slot. He's a king, and that's his solution. Titian painted her in 1553. She's lying on a bed of rumpled silk, looking up, and golden light is pouring through the open ceiling like rain. The figure leaning in the corner, watching, is probably a nurse or a servant. The details keep shifting depending on which version of the painting you're looking at, and Titian made at least 5 of them. But the image is the same, a woman sealed away from the world, and something finding her anyway. What finds her is Zeus. He comes in as a shower of gold, one of his more creative approaches, which is saying something. Danae gets pregnant. Her son is Perseus. Acrisius, faced with the thing he'd been trying to prevent, did the sensible thing and didn't kill them directly. He had Danae and the infant Perseus sealed in a wooden chest and thrown into the sea. The chest washed up on the island of Seriphos, where a fisherman named Dictys found it and took them in. Perseus grew up there. He and his mother were safe, basically, for a few years, until Dictys's brother Polydectes became king. Polydectes wanted Danae. Perseus, now a young man, was in the way. Polydectes came up with a plan. He announced he was going to marry someone else, and he asked all the men of Seriphos to contribute a horse to the wedding gift. Perseus didn't have a horse. He was poor. He said he'd get whatever Polydectes wanted. Anything. A rash thing to say in a Greek myth, because Polydectes took him up on it immediately. He wanted the head of Medusa, now. Medusa was one of the 3 Gorgons, and she was the only mortal one, but that's not what made her famous. What made her famous was that anyone who looked at her turned to stone. Polydectes had just sent Perseus to die. Perseus wouldn't have gotten far on his own, but 2 gods stepped in, and their reasons are worth paying attention to. Athena gave him a mirrored shield, polished to such a high shine that it worked like a bronze mirror. The point was that Perseus could look at Medusa's reflection without meeting her gaze directly. Hermes gave him a curved sword, specifically designed for the job, and told him how to find the Hesperides, who would give him further equipment. What Perseus collected, over the next part of the journey, was something like a kit, a pair of winged sandals. A bag called a kibisis, which was the only thing that could hold the head safely after he cut it. And a helm of darkness, Hades' own helmet, which made the wearer invisible. The gods, in other words, handed him a solution to every specific problem he'd face. The sword for the neck, the shield for the gaze, the bag for the aftermath, the sandals to fly in and out, the helmet so Medusa's sisters couldn't see him. What the myth is doing here is actually interesting. Perseus isn't a hero because he's stronger or braver. He's a hero because he asked for help and used the tools correctly. Medusa wasn't always what she became. Before the snakes, before the stone-cold gaze, and this part is in Ovid, she was a priestess in Athena's temple. Beautiful by all accounts, one of the most beautiful mortals alive. Poseidon assaulted her in the temple, in the sacred space of the goddess she served. Athena's response was to transform Medusa, snakes for hair, a face that killed on sight. There's a version of this you could read charitably, that Athena was protecting her, making her untouchable, but the more you sit with it, the harder that reading is to hold. The other 2 Gorgons, Stheno and Euryale, were transformed too, and they hadn't done anything. They were Medusa's sisters, they got the same face. Ovid, writing in the 1st century BC, is the main source for this part of the story, and he doesn't dress it up. The transformation is presented as a punishment. The crime was happening in the temple. That's what Perseus is flying toward now, equipped by every god who'd help him. A woman who was already, probably, a cautionary story about power, and about who gets blamed for what happens to them. The Gorgons lived somewhere in the far west, near the ocean's edge. Perseus flew in on the winged sandals, wearing the helmet of darkness, and found Medusa sleeping. He kept his eyes on the mirrored shield, watching her reflection, not her face. He swung the curved sword. He cut off her head. From the stump of her neck, 2 things were born in that moment, a golden giant named Chrysaor and a white horse with wings. Pegasus. That last detail tends to surprise people. Pegasus, in the popular imagination, is a separate creature with his own mythology, and he becomes that eventually. But his origin is here, in this moment, born from Medusa's blood on the ground of the western shore. Perseus grabbed the head, got it into the bag, critically, without looking at it, and flew. Medusa's sisters, Stheno and Euryale, woke up. They couldn't see him because of the helmet. They could smell the blood. He could hear them flying, somewhere in the sky around him, not knowing exactly where he was. He flew east, back toward the world he knew, with the head of the woman Athena had punished in a bag slung over his shoulder. On the way home, Perseus found someone chained to a rock. Her name was Andromeda. She was there because her mother Cassiopeia had boasted that Andromeda was more beautiful than the Nereids, Poseidon's attendants, the sea nymphs. The Nereids complained. Poseidon sent a sea monster to ravage the coast. The oracle said the only fix was to sacrifice Andromeda. So there she was, chained to a cliff, and this is the part that always gets me. She's there because of something her mother said. Not anything she did. Perseus, still carrying the head in the bag, still flying on the sandals, killed the monster and married her. Now, his mother Danae was still back on Seriphos. Polydectes was still pressing her. Perseus flew home. He went directly to the feast where Polydectes was holding court. He said he'd brought the gift he promised. He reached into the bag and held up the head. Polydectes, and everyone who served him, turned to stone. That's the end of the man who sent Perseus to die, a room full of statues. Dictys, the fisherman who'd actually taken them in, became king of Seriphos, which feels about right. Perseus gave the head to Athena. She mounted it on her aegis, her shield, or in some versions her breastplate, where it stayed permanently, still capable of turning enemies to stone. The gaze that had protected Medusa from further harm after Athena turned her became a weapon Athena wore into battle. Make of that what you will. Perseus and Andromeda went to Argos. His grandfather Acrisius had fled when he heard Perseus was coming, old prophecy, old fear. But Perseus found him eventually, at an athletic competition in another city. He was competing in the discus throw. The discus slipped, or the wind caught it, or maybe it was just the kind of thing that happens when a Greek oracle has decided how something ends. It hit Acrisius in the crowd, killed him. This was the king who'd locked his daughter in a tower, who'd sealed her in a chest and thrown her into the sea. He died watching his grandson compete at a sports day. Not in battle, not by any deliberate act. Perseus hadn't even known he was there. Everyone remembers who held the sword. Nobody asks why she had snakes.